I still vividly remember that day, the day I first met Mr. Bennett in the pediatric ward of Massachusetts General Hospital. Spring sunlight was streaming through the windows of the patient rooms as I made my routine rounds through the corridors, filled with the familiar scent of disinfectant. An elderly gentleman in an expensive suit visited one of my critically ill pediatric patients. He was the patient's grandfather, Robert Bennett, who would later become my father-in-law. That evening, when his son Michael came to visit, we exchanged words for the first time. He greeted me, in my nurse's uniform, with a natural, warm smile. "Nurse, my father told me about you. Thank you so much for taking such dedicated care of my grandfather." He spoke to me in a gentle tone, quite different from his father's stern demeanor, with a smile that radiated warmth. His eyes held a kindness that respected others as equals. That was our beginning. My courtship with Michael was like something out of a movie. Despite his prestigious position as a senior engineer at a Google-affiliated company, he was surprisingly humble and treated me, a nurse from a middle-class family, with genuine respect. On weekends, we would stroll through the Boston Museum of Fine Arts and the Public Garden, and attend classical concerts in old churches. However, the first shadow fell over our happiness when I met his mother. In the quiet residential area of Chestnut Hill, a Victorian mansion stood with dignified elegance beyond a garden where magnolias bloomed in full glory. Patricia Bennett received me in that mansion. In a reception room filled with antique furniture, she maintained perfect poise while pouring tea. Yet from that moment, I noticed something cold in her eyes. Behind her flawless smile, I caught a glimpse of contempt. A nurse? Well, that's a noble profession. Though young women in this area tend to choose more, shall we say, creative careers. The sarcasm in her words was unmistakable. Contempt for me seemed to ooze from her entire being, clothed in luxury brands. After our engagement announcement, the situation gradually worsened. During the wedding preparations, Mrs. Patricia orchestrated various forms of harassment. Most memorable was on our wedding day when she had arranged for the venue staff to mistake me for a cleaning lady. The staff looked utterly confused when they saw me in my white wedding gown. Nevertheless, our wedding was beautiful. At St. Thomas Church in Chestnut Hill, bathed in spring sunlight, we exchanged our vows of eternal love. Light streaming through the stained glass windows seemed to bless us as we stood at the altar. However, the real trial came afterward. My mother-in-law's reaction when I announced my pregnancy still pains my heart. We sat across from each other at her luxurious dining room table. "Oh my, carrying my grandchild. Are you quite sure?" It didn't take long to understand the implication of those words. Soon after, rumors about me began circulating in Chestnut Hill's social circles. Led by Margaret Sullivan, Patricia's best friend, whispers about the nurse who seduced a son from a good family began floating around elegant tea parties. As my due date approached, the situation became even more serious. On the day of my baby shower, my mother-in-law suddenly claimed illness and didn't attend. I later learned she had been enjoying lunch with friends at the country club that day. Photos had been posted on social media but were quickly deleted. My husband Michael, caught up in a busy period at work, hadn't noticed the gravity of these events. Between late-night meetings and overseas business trips, he tried his best to care for me, but his kindness only highlighted my loneliness. I was forced to face this twisted situation alone. The day I first held our daughter Emily in my arms at the hospital, I made a vow. I would protect this child from any form of discrimination. Her brown hair and blue eyes were proof of our love. However, that resolve would be tested sooner than I expected. That Sunday morning began with gentle spring sunshine. Cherry blossoms and dogwoods were in full bloom along the tree-lined streets of Chestnut Hill, and white magnolia flowers swayed in the breeze in the garden of the old Bennett family mansion. Holding Emily, I hesitated for a moment at the entrance. Looking up, the elegant Victorian building seemed to loom over me intimidatingly. The heavy wooden door with its brass knocker gleamed, telling tales of the house's history. "Welcome, Jennifer." Patricia opened the door with a perfect smile. She wore a Carolina Herrera two-piece suit, specially ordered for today, with a Van Cleef and Arpels necklace sparkling at her throat. Her bearing was as elegant as if she were gracing the cover of the Social Register. About 30 guests had already gathered in the reception room. The cream of Chestnut Hill society was elegantly sipping champagne, surrounded by antique furniture. Under the large crystal chandelier hanging from the ceiling, vases filled with spring flowers scattered light across the tables. "Oh, so this is the baby everyone's been talking about." Margaret Sullivan approached, dispensing false pleasantries. Her eyes examined Emily as if appraising an unusual exhibit. "Does she really look like Michael?" Small laughs rippled through the room at her words. I held Emily closer to my chest, instinctively protecting her from the deliberate malice. The party proceeded with superficial elegance. Exquisite hors d'oeuvres were served one after another, accompanied by fine wines and impeccable service from perfectly trained staff. Yet beneath this refined atmosphere, something cold always lurked. The gift-giving ceremony began. A Hermes baby blanket, a Tiffany silver spoon, a Ralph Lauren baby clothing collection. Each gift seemed to proclaim the social status of its giver. Finally, Patricia stood up. "This is my special gift." She presented a small box tied with a blue ribbon. The room's atmosphere seemed to freeze for a moment. "Go ahead, open it." My hands trembled. Inside the box was a pink cat collar with a Tiffany charm, clearly expensive, but its meaning was cruelly clear. "Oh, isn't it perfect?" Patricia's voice rang through the reception room. "After all, this child is the offspring of a stray cat my son picked up, isn't she?" Malicious laughter filled the room. Before my eyes, Patricia brought the collar close to Emily's neck, her gestures almost like someone petting a real kitten. "Please stop." My voice trembled. But Patricia pretended not to hear and moved the collar even closer to Emily's neck. The baby began crying, distressed by the sudden contact. "There, perfect." More laughter echoed through the room. Tears rolled down my cheeks. At that moment, I thought to take out my smartphone and record this scene. With trembling hands, I pressed the record button as discreetly as possible. "Oh, Jennifer. Why are you crying? Can't you take a joke?" Patricia's voice dripped with false concern, but her eyes gleamed triumphantly. "I'm sorry. Emily seems unwell." I stood up and hastily left the room. I could still hear laughter behind me. In the hallway, I immediately called Michael. It went to voicemail. Right, he had mentioned an important meeting today. On my way to the entrance, I passed Robert Bennett on the landing. He seemed about to say something when he saw my tear-stained face, but I couldn't stop. Back home, I immediately went to my computer and backed up the video from my phone. Then I began organizing the emails and photos I had been saving as evidence of the harassment. Wiping away tears, I strengthened my resolve. No more running away. This humiliation would be the last. That night, Michael returned home after 11 p.m. His tired expression told of a day spent chasing Silicon Valley project deadlines. His dark navy suit was slightly wrinkled from long hours of video conferences. "Jennifer? You're still up?" Michael stopped when he saw me waiting in the living room. He immediately noticed my red, swollen eyes. "What happened? Did something happen at Mother's party?" Those words triggered something in me. All the emotions I had been desperately holding back came flooding out. "Your mother, she did something to Emily." With trembling hands, I took out my smartphone and played the video. The cruel laughter from that room played through the speakers. The screen clearly showed Patricia bringing the cat collar close to Emily's neck. The color drained from Michael's face. He sat down slowly on the sofa, his eyes fixed on the screen. "Is this some kind of joke?" His voice betrayed the confusion of someone confronted with an unbelievable reality. "This is no joke. This is what your mother did to our daughter in front of 30 people today. But this is just the tip of the iceberg." I opened my computer and began showing him the evidence I had collected. Harassing emails from before the wedding. Deliberate spread of rumors in social circles. The baby shower incident. All organized chronologically in folders that opened one after another. Why didn't you tell me before?" Michael's voice shook. "Because you were busy. And, honestly, I had my pride. I wanted to handle this situation on my own." Michael stood up with a deep sigh and walked to the window. His reflection was visible in the window overlooking the night view. "Mother, she's always been a perfectionist. I knew she was overly concerned with family background, education, and social status, but I never imagined it would go this far." He turned back and looked straight into my eyes. "Jennifer, I'm so sorry. I should have noticed. I failed to protect my wife and daughter from this treatment." His words brought fresh tears to my eyes, but this time they were tears of relief. "But that's enough. I can't stay silent anymore." That collar was the final insult. Michael nodded slowly. "Let's go see Father tomorrow." "Father he'll make the right decision." That night, we talked for a long time. By Emily's bedside as she slept, we planned our next steps. Occasionally, we could hear the baby's peaceful breathing. Each time, it renewed our determination. The next morning, in the car heading to Robert Bennett's law office, Michael spoke quietly. "Mother needs to change. If she won't, then we need to change the definition of family." The morning sun reflected brightly off the skyscrapers in Boston's financial district. Robert Bennett's office was on the top floor. In the reception area filled with the rich scent of leather, the secretary announced our arrival. "I've been expecting you." Robert Bennett received us in his spacious office surrounded by large windows. Dressed in a navy Brooks Brothers suit, his expression suggested he had already sensed something. "I've already heard about yesterday's incident from Margaret Sullivan's daughter. She was deeply ashamed of her mother's behavior." He had already begun taking action before we showed our evidence. As expected of a senior partner at a major law firm. His efficiency gave me some comfort. However, I didn't expect this much evidence. Robert's expression grew increasingly stern as he watched the video. "This is clear psychological abuse. Against a 2-month-old infant, no less." He sighed deeply and took a photograph from his desk drawer. It was a photo of a younger Patricia. She always had a tendency to demand perfection. But that was also a reflection of her own insecurities. I've heard her mother was similar. I leaned forward at those words. You mean, this has been a generational issue? Yes. The values peculiar to high society have been passed down in a distorted form through generations. But that's no excuse. Rather, we must break this cycle now. Robert stood and walked to the window. Looking down at Boston's cityscape, he spoke his decision. From today, we begin concrete action. First, we'll inform the church authorities. Then report to the charity organizations she's involved with. And simultaneously. He paused for a moment. We'll begin divorce preparations. This is my decision. She needs time to deeply reflect on her actions. The air in the room froze at those words. That's. I couldn't hide my confusion. I hadn't expected things to escalate this far. Jennifer, don't worry. This is between Patricia and me. It's also my responsibility for pretending not to notice for so long. Robert's voice carried firm resolve. However, there's something we need to do first. Call an emergency family meeting. Patricia needs to understand the gravity of her actions. He returned to his desk and called his secretary on the intercom. Prepare the conference room immediately. I'll contact Patricia directly. After hanging up, he turned to us. This will be a difficult time. But remember this. This decision is also for Emily's future. I don't want her to inherit these distorted values. A heavy atmosphere hung over the top floor of the skyscraper housing Robert Bennett's law office. The main family members had already gathered in the conference room. The first thing that caught my eye was Patricia's clearly distressed state, unusual for someone known for her graceful composure. She couldn't hide her confusion at her husband's emergency summons, and even her usually perfect makeup seemed slightly disheveled. What is this meeting for? So early in the morning. Her voice held a hint of anxiety beneath its usual arrogance. You'll know soon enough. Robert's voice was cold. He sat at the end of the large conference table, reviewing documents. Family members arrived one after another. Patricia's sister Elizabeth, her brother James, and Robert's brother Richard. All took their seats, unable to hide their agitation. Michael and I were directed to sit next to Robert. From the conference room windows, Boston's cityscape spread out before us. Church spires were visible through the morning haze. Somewhere, church bells struck 9. Let's begin. Robert stood up. He took a tablet and projected an image onto the wall screen. Patricia, could you explain this? The screen showed footage from that Sunday's party. The audio began playing through the room. Patricia's cruel words, the surrounding laughter, and the babies crying. This can't be. The color drained from Patricia's face. Wait, this was just a joke. Everyone was laughing, weren't they? A joke? Robert's voice resonated deeply. You call psychological abuse of a 2-month-old infant a joke? He manipulated the tablet further. The screen displayed evidence of past harassment, one after another. Emails, social media posts, secretly taken photos. All organized chronologically. Were these all jokes too? But she. Patricia pointed at me. She's not of our class. How could a mere middle-class nurse be part of our family? Silence. Robert's angry voice echoed through the conference room. Everyone held their breath. That statement just made everything clear. Your deep-rooted discrimination. He took out some documents. This is a divorce mediation application. I've already consulted with lawyers. What? Patricia's voice trembled. And these are copies of reports to the board. More documents were presented. A demand for resignation from the Boston Ladies Charity Foundation presidency. Notice of removal from the St. Thomas Church Board. And... Wait! Patricia cried out. Don't I have a right to explain? You've already exercised that right, Robert said coldly. Just now, you revealed your true feelings in front of everyone. A heavy silence fell over the conference room. Your actions go beyond individual misconduct. This time, Richard Bennett spoke up. This is a serious matter affecting the honor of the Bennett family. Appropriate measures are necessary. So, you're cutting me off. Patricia's voice took on a hysterical tone. You need time for deep reflection and rehabilitation, Richard continued. First, I suggest you move to the family home in Cambridge. Cambridge. But that old house. You have no choice, Robert interrupted. The arrangements with the moving company are already made. At this point, Elizabeth quietly spoke up. Patricia, you've always sought perfection too much. Just like Mother. Liz. Even you. But this time you went too far. A baby? To be so cruel to a 2-month-old baby. Tears welled up in Elizabeth's eyes. We received similar treatment from Mother. But to repeat it with the next generation. Her words changed the atmosphere in the conference room. Family members who had been silent began speaking up. The darkness carried by generations of Bennett women gradually came to light. That's exactly why, Robert raised his voice. We must break this chain now. He stood and walked to the window. Patricia, you have two choices. One is to accept all these measures and walk the path of rehabilitation while receiving counseling. The other is all-out confrontation. But in that case, we won't hesitate to take legal action. We have plenty of evidence of abuse. You mean, criminal charges? Patricia's voice was like a shriek. That depends on your choice. At this moment, something unexpected happened. Michael, who had been sitting quietly, suddenly stood up. Mother. His voice was filled with sadness. I love you. But if you're not willing to change. He placed his hand on my shoulder. I will fully support Father's measures to protect my family. This might be my final act of filial love. At those words, Patricia's composure crumbled. For the first time, she began shedding real tears. Michael. I. She suddenly turned to face me. Jennifer. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, she began sobbing violently. The heavy atmosphere in the conference room gradually began to shift. Outside the window, a ray of light began breaking through the clouds. Robert slowly began gathering the documents. Let's confirm the decisions. Patricia will move to the family home in Cambridge. She will immediately resign from all social positions. She will receive counseling twice a week. For 6 months, she will be prohibited from meeting Emily. Any contact after that will depend on the counselor's judgment. Are there any objections? Everyone in the room quietly nodded, each carrying their own thoughts. After the meeting, I found myself alone with Robert in the hallway. Are such severe measures really? Jennifer, he smiled gently. Sometimes we must hurt those we love to save them. That's what real family means. I nodded deeply at his words. Outside the window, spring sunlight embraced the city, announcing the beginning of a new season. Change sometimes brings pain. But true healing lies beyond that pain. Our new family story was about to begin. About 6 months after that day, the scenery in Chestnut Hill had changed to autumn colors. In the garden of our new home, maple leaves were falling, and warm afternoon sunlight streamed in. Emily was now 8 months old. She lay on a baby blanket in the garden, reaching for the colorful fallen leaves with an innocent smile. Her brown hair had grown a bit longer, and her blue eyes sparkled with curiosity. Watching her smile makes everything feel worthwhile. I turned at Michael's voice behind me. He had been working from home more often lately. Even after his promotion to new project leader, he chose to prioritize time with his family. How was the counselor's report today? Michael let out a deep sigh. Mother is changing, little by little. Especially, she's finally starting to face the root causes of her behavior. Patricia had been living quietly in the family home in Cambridge. The twice-weekly counseling sessions had apparently become a major turning point for her. Last week, I received a letter from Mother. Michael pulled an envelope from his pocket. On expensive stationery, Patricia's neat handwriting formed the words. For years, I've avoided facing the darkness within me. I unconsciously accepted the values inherited from my mother as absolute, unable to recognize their distortion. The letter contained her first sincere confessions. Through counseling, I'm beginning to understand how cruel and inhumane my actions were. Particularly, my behavior toward an innocent baby can never be forgiven. I closed my eyes involuntarily. The memory of that day still comes back occasionally. Jennifer, I want to offer my heartfelt apology for everything I've done to you and Emily. I couldn't read any further. Tears were flowing from my eyes. Mother isn't asking for forgiveness, Michael said quietly. I think she just needed to acknowledge her mistakes and put them into words. Just then, we heard a car approaching from beyond the garden. Ah, Father. Robert Bennett entered the garden in his usual navy suit. Recently, he had been visiting every weekend, cherishing his time with his granddaughter. Ah, what beautiful weather today. He approached Emily with a broad smile. His usually stern expression always softened completely in front of his granddaughter. Looking at this child's smile reminds me of what truly matters in life. Robert had been saying such things more often lately. The divorce mediation was complete, and he had begun walking a new path in life. By the way, he turned to us, I heard from Elizabeth the other day. Elizabeth, Patricia's sister, currently works as a psychological counselor in the Boston suburbs. She says Patricia's changes are definitely progressing. Particularly, she's beginning to show deep understanding of the trauma inherited from her mother and its impact on the next generation. Michael and I exchanged glances at those words. Actually, I have one more thing to report. Robert pulled a photograph from his jacket pocket. It showed a young Patricia holding baby Michael. She often looks at this photo during counseling sessions, apparently. To remember her pure love as a mother. The autumn sunlight gently illuminated the photograph. The doctor says we might be able to lift the visitation restriction soon. I felt my heart beat strongly at those words. However, Robert chose his words carefully. Jennifer's wishes take absolute priority. There will be no pressure. I watched Emily playing on the lawn. She was picking up fallen leaves and examining them with sparkling eyes. "Let me think about it." Just then, Emily suddenly turned to us and flashed a brilliant smile. At that innocent smile, I made my decision. "But I think, someday, Emily will need her grandmother." Michael gently embraced my shoulders. "There's no need to rush," Robert said kindly. "Little by little, at your own pace. That's the best medicine." A pleasant breeze swept through the garden in the evening light. Red maple leaves danced down as if in blessing. Our new family story had only just begun. Surely, various trials still awaited us ahead. But we're not afraid anymore. Because we've learned that true strength isn't about seeking perfection, but about accepting imperfection, learning from it, and growing together. Emily picked up another fallen leaf. Her profile, illuminated by the setting sun, shone like an angel. Hope always exists in such simple daily moments. We had etched this certain truth in our hearts.